The NFL draft is officially passed. We're going to talk about where some Gophers names landed for their next opportunity, and we're going to dive into who could be the next Gophers to get drafted next season, who is going to have that intrigue heading into 2024. Jumping in today.
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
What's up, Gopher fans? You are listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. But today, we're bringing it to you on a Sunday night show. We're going to talk about where some of these Gophers landed in the undrafted free agency and where they'll be taking their shots at the next level. We're also going to talk about some trending things for the Gophers when it comes to the NFL draft, but then we're going to talk about who are names to keep in mind for the 2025 draft. And finally, what a successful season would look like for the wide receiver room as a whole for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss any of your daily Gophers content moving forward. Now, we're going to hit that off-season point where we start to do 3 shows a week instead of 5 shows a week. But I appreciate your leniency. I appreciate your loyal listening, and I hope you are enjoying the content. Be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube if you haven't already, or leave a 5-star review over on any podcasting platform that you listen to so others can find the show. Now, let's jump in and talk about where some of these Gophers players landed. Now, yesterday on the show, we talked about the one Gopher who was drafted in the NFL draft, Tyler Nubin, in the second round to the New York Giants. Now, personally, I was baffled that Spann-Ford didn't get drafted in at least that later day 3 window. I think there were some tight ends that went off the board that he definitely had more production on the field than, on top of being a better run blocker, on top of having more intangibles and size. But I'm not an NFL GM. I'm not making those calls. And in the end, it's all about who you know and what connections you have when it gets to those later stages as well. But he is going to have to make the best of his opportunity, and he picked a team that is definitely well known. So Spann-Ford will be the first name we talk about here. He is heading to the Dallas Cowboys as an undrafted free agent. He was definitely one of the high priority undrafted free agents to sign following the draft, and his decision came pretty quickly. Now, I know he had a good relationship with that Cowboys staff, and he actually knows a decent amount of their draft class as well, but then you get to talk about he's going to be pairing with a quarterback that he is very familiar with through his high school days and what have you. Quarterback 2 over with the Cowboys, maybe their future quarterback if Dak Prescott doesn't sign at the end of this year, and that's Trey Lance. Trey Lance, drafted from North Dakota State, drafted to San Francisco, eventually traded to the Cowboys, and now Spann-Ford, Trey Lance on the same team. So hopefully that can be advantageous for Brevin too. Hopefully he can get down there, get to work right away. And if he needs some help with the playbook, if he needs to get up to speed, if he needs extra time, he has that relationship with the quarterback of all people, which is definitely not a bad relationship to have heading into that type of situation. Now, I know he's hungry. I've talked to him after this draft, and I know he's ready to get to work. He's excited about the opportunity, and he's excited to head to Dallas. I think he can grind. He can push his way into a roster spot, and I think that a lot of people have that mindset of, oh, he is a guy who could seriously take a roster spot even as an undrafted free agent. So definitely all love, all respect, all hopes for Spann-Ford as he takes that next step in his journey. Now, he's not the only Gopher to sign as an undrafted free agent with the Dallas Cowboys. In fact, his teammate Corey Crooms transfer in from Western Michigan, played this past year with Minnesota, and was second on the team in receiving yards this past year. He is also headed to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Corey Crooms had his pro day here, and he got some love, got some recognition, but he also ended up getting invited out to a local pro day for the Chicago Bears, and I believe maybe he had a phone call or something with the New York Jets. So he had started to generate interest as the later stages of this NFL draft process was going on, so he had some fans, and he ended up getting a couple different offers for an undrafted free agent position, ended up signing with Dallas. So now those two teammates will be headed down there trying to make a roster and stand out with one of the most iconic football brands in the NFL. But on top of that, there have been a number of players that have made it as undrafted free agents and gone on to do huge things. Dallas has a history. You think about the NBA with the Miami Heat, who have just churned out undrafted free agent type guys who turn into starters. Well, Dallas has had some history with that as well. So both of them, I wish them nothing but luck. Hopefully they both can make a roster, and hopefully we can talk about them as NFL players on an NFL roster moving forward. Definitely things to keep in mind. But another player who ended up as an undrafted free agent was Kyler Baugh. He put up a massive number of reps on the bench press on his pro day. I was 33 or 34. He's got size. He's got speed. He's not a super tall defensive lineman, but he has the weight, and he plays with a fury and a tenacity on that defensive line that he definitely drew some intrigue. And he is headed to the Big Easy. He is headed to the New Orleans Saints as an undrafted free agent. I'm excited for him to be able to work with some of that defensive line and overall a defensive head coach. So if he can stand out and really build that connection with the coach and get himself in the conversation with either a roster spot or a practice squad spot, it's definitely not a bad place for him to latch on. He's also there with former teammate Jordan Howden, who it was a starter for the Saints at times last year at safety, so definitely has a connection down there as he heads that way as well. And then the last Gopher that I want to talk about is Chris Autman-Bell. He got a camp invite with the New York Giants. A lot of people are starting to call them the Gophers East, as they have Carter Coughlin, John Michael Schmitz, Tyler Nubin, and now you've got Chris Autman-Bell with a camp invite. Now, I heard he also received another camp invite for the other team in New York, the Jets, and that is on a different weekend. So he could potentially have two different camp invites where he's getting looks. That's not a bad idea at all. Trying to get as many opportunities as you can to get to that fall camp and through the preseason with a team and hopefully be able to sign as an undrafted free agent. That's the next up step for Chris Autman-Bell. So overall, those are your Gophers who are getting pro looks aside from Tyler Nubin, who was drafted. Names we're going to keep an eye on over the following week or so. Brady Weeks, the long snapper for the Golden Gophers. I'm surprised he hasn't already signed with a team in some capacity, because long snapping is an undervalued talent, especially when it comes to the NFL draft. But the consistency that he has brought with this Gophers team, I would not be surprised to see him land somewhere. And then Trayvon Jones, cornerback, who had a fantastic year with the Gophers this past year, had a good career at the FCS or lower FBS level when it came to being a cornerback before he transferred this way. It was the lower FBS, correction there. But regardless, those are the names that the Gophers had in this class. Chris Collins was another one. Sean Tyler was another one. Haven't heard too much from them on that front, but that's what we know right now with the Gophers team, and hopefully all of those guys wishing them nothing but success moving forward. Now, Minnesota's draft success might not be the most boastful in pure quantity or numbers compared to your Penn States, your Michigans, your Ohio States, and what have you. But impressively, Minnesota is one of 13 schools in the country that have had a first or second round draft pick in each of the last 5 years of the NFL draft. The other schools in that category are Oklahoma, okay, Ohio State, yep, Georgia, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Alabama, Clemson, Florida, LSU, and USC. Those are the names you would think of, the schools you would think of when it comes to having a pick, at least one pick in the first or second round in each of the last 5 years. But Minnesota is right there with those 13, those other schools. And that is something to be proud of. That is something to be intrigued by, because you can see the growth and the development, and that pro teams are getting interested with Minnesota players. Now, that's not bad company to be in at all, as those are seen as some of the best teams in the country, both in record, but also in NFL draft development. Now, Minnesota's picks in that draft time are, in 2020, it was Antoine Winfield Jr. In 2021, it was Rashad Bateman. 2022, it was Boye Mafe. 2023, it was John Michael Schmitz. And 2024, it was Tyler Nubin. Now, each of these players has had varying levels of success, but each is 100% capable of being a starter long-term in the NFL. Now, Tweez Antoine Winfield Jr. is an all-pro last year on the verge of signing a massive second contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Rashad Bateman just got a contract extension and is looking to have a breakout year away from the injuries and have a fully healthy season while he continues to stack production. Boye Mafe has showed flashes in year one and then goes to year two with even greater strides, going from 41 tackles and 3 sacks to 52 tackles, 9 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, and 6 PBUs. Boye Mafe was balling in his year two. And then John Michael Schmitz had a terrible team in year one, but hopefully we're seeing improvements across the board in year two. But he is the staple at center and the starter for your New York Giants. We'll see what happens with Tyler Newman, but overall, that is good progress, good pro development. And I think that trend is going to continue in 2025. So that carries us to our next point of who are the names to keep in mind for the 2025 NFL draft. We're diving into that coming up next. First, all right, game off. We got to pause here and we're going to talk about our friends over at Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You're already talked about that. I've heard about Monopoly Go, but there's so much good stuff about this game. And in Monopoly Go, which is a mobile game you can download right now for free, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's also tons of playing pieces you can unlock to travel boards with, hilarious emojis to taunt your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. So overall, there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover with Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it for free now on the Google Play or App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. All right, Gophers fans, let's dive into the names that could possibly be at the top of the list for the Gophers in the NFL draft of 2025. But don't forget to head on to Locked On Minnesota Sports, where you can get 24/7 of your top sports news when it comes to strictly Minnesota. That's Locked On Minnesota Sports. You can find anything from the Wolves, who are playing their playoff game as I continue to record right now, hoping for the sweep. On top of that, you've got your Vikings, who just got through the draft. You've got your wild hockey talk on how they can get back on track for next year. The Twins, which is going on right now, and then everything Locked On Golden Gophers here. You can find all of that content consistently over at the 24/7 streaming channel of Locked On Minnesota Sports. Hopefully you'll tap in there, but let's talk about the names to keep in mind for the 2025 NFL draft. Now, guys who are likely on the radar for 2025, the very likely category, the thing that I think is at the top of the list for Gophers in next year's draft class is number 1, Ariante Ursery. Ursery was the number 5 best graded tackle on the season from PFF last year. He was also the 5th best run blocking grade in all of the Power 5 conferences. He has consistency. He has protection. He's a left tackle that will absolutely continue to climb in draft interest if he keeps that consistency going. His name is probably the most likely to go of the offensive lineman for the Minnesota Gophers. But on top of that, he's most likely to keep Minnesota's first or second round streak going that we just mentioned in the first segment of this show. Now, another player that is probably in that very likely category if they enter for the draft is Cody Lindenberg if he has a healthy season. Now, Minnesota has had a history of some linebacker success, and lately their alumni have been showing out. Jack Gibbons, prior to his injuries, has done well with the Titans. Devondre Campbell has done well. Now he's over with the 49ers. Blake Cashman was a star for the Texans last year and is going to play here in Minnesota. On top of that, you've got Thomas Rush, who's latched on with the Tennessee Titans. Minnesota has given their linebacker success in the league something to look at when it comes to the pro development here. And Fleck has given Cody Lindenberg all the praise and his high talent. Now, he has mentioned that his athleticism and how he carries himself, the speed, the strength, and all of that, he could be the best of the bunch when it comes to linebackers that Coach Fleck has ever had on his team. And if Cody can put together a fully healthy season, he not only should easily lead this team in tackles, but he should be in the running for an all Big Ten team, which should help him get higher on draft interest. Now, he has great character. He's a leader of the team. He's a captain of the team for 2 years now. And the biggest question is, does he leave for the draft, or does he want more time in college to not only build up on his draft stock, but due to the time he has lost in college with injuries, he is a complete culture guy. He loves this team. He loves this program. He loves these coaches. So is that going to be something where he wants that extra time and takes that extra year? Or if he has a great year due to the injuries that have happened in the past, would he take that opportunity and run with it? It's a big question, but I definitely think Cody will have his intrigue in the league. And then finally, the last name I want to mention for the very likely of next year's draft is Ja Joyner. He's been a nightmare for creating pressures in the FBS college football. And now in 2022, he didn't convert a ton of sacks, but in 2023, he started to show that progress. He started to flip the switch. So he went from just being a leader in the Big Ten in pressures to being somewhere in the best of the best in the conference when it comes to sacks created. He was a monster. He not only did he have the pressures, but he got home with the third highest pass rush win rate in the nation, only behind Leatu Latu, the 15th pick of the NFL draft, the number 1 defensive player taken this last year, and Abdul Carter, who is seen as potentially a top 3 pick in the NFL draft next year. So if Ja Joyner continues to be in that company, he will also continue to be in the conversation as an early draft pick for the Gophers next season. Absolutely believe he's on the draft board. I think with a similar season or even slight progression, he could have many NFL organizations seriously interested, and he could be in that first, second, third round conversation for Gophers players as well. Now, the final name I want to put in that possibly very likely category, I think he's right between the 2 tiers of very likely and possibly, is Justin Wally. Now, he's been on the draft radar since his stellar freshman season. He's had a fairly good sophomore year. Last year, there were some struggles, but there were still flashes of brilliance. There was some awesome leadership. There was some big play mentality, but he's back in 24. And if he can put it all together and put a solid year together, he will definitely gain interest, even with a moderate year, even with just a average year for him. I think it puts his name into a similar territory of what we saw from Jordan Howden or Terrell Smith in that 5th, 6th round category, if it's just kind of an average year. Now, if he really balls out, he can definitely put his name even higher. So I think Justin Wally is a name to be on the lookout for. That's 4 Gophers that could see their names for sure drafted next year if they all enter. And then on the possibly category, right beyond that, I think Dragan Kesich, Big Ten Kicker of the Year, great completion percentage, consistently boots it out of the back of the end zone for kickoffs, has a calm and clutch factor with game winners, ability to hit from 55 plus. All of those are going to be things that intrigue the NFL. With a very similar year to last year or a better year, I think Dragan will definitely have the interest of scouts. Daniel Jackson, a top wide receiver in the conference last year. I'll be curious to see. I thought Isaiah Williams was going to get drafted. He ended up not getting drafted. He was the 2nd highest in production in the Big Ten last year. So I think Daniel Jackson's going to need a big year to get into that conversation. Now, he's a good route separator. He's got a great route tree in general. He's very versatile at the wide receiver position. He can play outside, he can play in the slot, but I think he's going to need a 1K year to really show year after year after year that progression that we have seen from Daniel Jackson, leading this team in receptions, leading this team in receiving yards, leading this team in touchdowns. If he can continue to do that and put up even bigger numbers with Max Brosmer this next season, I think people are definitely going to have Daniel Jackson on their draft boards as a later round target. So Daniel Jackson's a name to definitely keep in mind as a possibly. And then Jack Henderson. Jack Henderson has a size, skill set, athleticism, and production that will give him a shot. There's no question about it. But he's created turnovers. He's led the team in tackles after making a jump from the FCS to the FBS. And if he takes it to another level, if he kicks it up a gear from last year, I think he's definitely going to see scouts coming through and seeing interest in him for either a safety position or that nickel corner that we've been seeing him play in the slot with Minnesota. So I think he's definitely a player that could pop off with Coach Heatherman and what he wants to do with this defense. And if that happens, I think he puts his name on draft board conversations. Now, with a major season, you've got names like Max Brosmer, Ethan Robinson, Quinn Carroll, and Tyler Cooper, who all could pop up on the NFL draft radar. So that's a lot of names for the Gophers. It could be one of the biggest years for Gophers players to have a number of names interested, not only for the Gophers Pro Day next year, but actually see their names drafted in the NFL draft in 2025. So hopefully the Gophers have a big season. Hopefully they find a lot of success, and hopefully all of those guys we just named ball out and find themselves looking at the NFL draft moving forward. Now, finally, to wrap up today's show, I want to talk about what it would look like for this wide receiver room to have success after, even with being a run first team. How does the room as a whole find success, or what looks like a successful year for them? We're going to dive into that coming up next. First, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel, because it's the best time to bet on every game with the number one sports book in America. That is FanDuel. It's playoff time with the NBA and NHL. You've got highlight level games night in after night out, and you always have something to choose from. On top of that, baseball's in full swing. Golf is getting going. So right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you got to do is place a bet, and win or lose, you're getting $150 in bonus bets. And so what is stopping you? It's an app that's simple, safe, and secure to use. On top of that, you can bet on anything from slap shots, home runs, slam dunks, winners, losers, people getting fired, anything you can dream up. You basically can find it over at FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. You make a bet and you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And finally, we got to talk about our friends over at Game Time, and they are the best ticketing app out there, in my opinion, hands down. That's the place you want to be, because they have the best last minute deals when it comes to tickets. It's why they say last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And that's the thing, they have a lowest price guarantee. So that means you will find the lowest price for those seats, or the Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So definitely give it a check. On top of that, they have Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, whether that be a loss of job, or anything like that. They're going to have you covered. So the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, 24-hour returns guaranteed, job loss assurance, and an on-time ticket delivery. That sounds like they've got you covered, and they are something to feel comfortable and less worry about when it comes to the ticket buying process. So you definitely want to give them a try. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's downloading the Game Time app, creating your account, and using promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDON college, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, finally, we're talking about what could a successful season look like for this wide receiver room, knowing we're a run-first team, knowing we're not going to probably pass for 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 yards that some of the top passing teams in the country put up. But even if we can get to the 80s, 90s, 100s when it comes to passing attempts for this Gophers team, that would still be some of the higher passing teams for Coach Fleck. So what would be successful when it comes to that numbers? Well, I'm looking at, in general, you've brought in a number of additions. You got Jalen Varner, who was a 1,000-yard receiver last year and had 12 touchdowns. You have Christian Driver, 4-star player coming from Penn State, who has a Hall of Fame level player in his dad to learn from and grow from and have understanding from. On top of that, you have Tyler Williams, who's a 4-star transferring in from Georgia. Then you have contributors from last year. You have Daniel Jackson at 800 plus yards. You have Elijah Spencer, who had a 900 plus yard season prior to transferring to Minnesota, and Lemeki Brockington, who is healthy and taking strides to be a consistent weapon for the Gophers. And then you've got youth on this team. You've got Kenrick Lanier, Nuke Hayes, TJ McWilliams, Christian Hoskins. That's 10 names right there. And that isn't even including the incoming freshman that PJ Fleck has coming in this class. So no matter how the depth chart shakes out, no matter what could happen, what could be considered a successful season as a group for this wide receiver room, So I dove in and I took a look at the last few seasons. 2023, we had 0 receivers with over 1,000 yards. We only had 1 receiver with over 500 yards, and we had 1 other receiver with 200 yards or more. That's not including tight ends. So you had Daniel Jackson with 831 yards, Corey Crooms with 376, and then the next receiver with the most receiving yards production was 73 by Lemeki Brockington. Overall, not seen as a successful year as a passing team. We were one of the bottom teams in the country in passing. Now, 2022, we had 0 receivers with over 1,000, 1 with over 500, and 4 receivers with over 200 yards. So we had a 557, 338, 280, 214, and 203 were our receivers with the most yards. 2021, a year before, again, 0 1,000-yard receivers, 1 over 500, and 3 over 200. So what you're seeing in the years that Gophers fans have been like, man, we can't pass the ball. We have no passing attack. Our passing game is weak. We have no we need a more modern offense. We need balance. Well, you're seeing we've never had a receiver over 1,000 yards. We only have 1 that gets over 500, and we have a few sporadically over 200. So the Gophers need more than that. Now, you look at 2019, where the Gophers had 2 receivers over 1,000, 0 others over 500, and 1 other over 200 in Chris Bell with 371 yards. That would be seen as a great passing year for the Gophers. It was very exciting. Now, all of these years, obviously 2019 seems like the only successful season passing, and it also felt like the only season that really got things going, had excitement in the passing game. Now, I think that the Gophers can have a successful passing season without getting to that over 3,000 yards passing and still be a run-first team and still run the ball through Darius Taylor and the others on this team. They kind of lead the offense, but finding success in the passing game is only going to open up the running game more. I think a successful year with the wide receivers would look something like a combination of what we've seen over these last 3 years plus 2019. I don't think you're going to have 2 guys getting over that 1,000-yard mark, but I do think you could see something where the ball is spread out around a number of receivers, and that could still be a good thing. But how it's spread out is the big key here. I think you have to have at least 4 receivers with over 200 yards, but preferably 5 receivers over 200 yards. If you have 1 receiver over 1,000, 1 receiver over 500, additionally, but beyond that 1,000-yard receiver, and then 2 to 3 other receivers with at least over 200 yards, I would consider that a successful passing season, because that likely means that you're spreading the ball around a lot. You're showing that the offense can pass and distribute the ball across the board. And if you think about that, it would only take about 2,200 yards passing to your receivers. That is sufficientable. Or maybe if you're looking at it as a whole with the tight ends and the running backs in there, that's about 2,500 yards. That isn't impossible. That is actually something that is realistic and attainable if the Gophers just tick up their passing attempts a tiny bit on top of their quarterback making the completions, making the layups, making the easy passes, and connecting on those plays. Now, that is the exact range we have been predicting for Locked On Golden Gophers here when we talk about next season, is hitting that 2,500 passing yards. It's realistic, especially with a quarterback who's passed for over 3,000 yards for the past 2 seasons. So that should be achievable. Even last year, if the layups are hit, if the completion percentage goes up from the 53, 57% that it was, and it goes up to 60, 62, 63, you're likely sitting at about 2,400 yards passing last season, even through the struggles. So now we have a quarterback who usually averages a better completion percentage. We have a quarterback who has experience, who has a different play style, and is more of a progression reader, is more of a timing thrower, and all of that. If you take that attributes that Max Brosmer brings, and you even sprinkle it a little bit more successful than what we saw last year, we should be able to get to that 2,500 yards passing, which means this wide receiver room should be able to achieve 1 receiver over 1,000, another receiver over 500, and 2 to 3 other receivers with over 200 yards. That's what I'm looking for. That is what Gophers fans should hope for and potentially even expect from this Gophers team moving forward. And even with all that, you can still have a run-first team. Now, tomorrow we're going to talk about why Max Brosmer could be as advertised this season, and also thoughts on the Gophers safety room and what it will look like now that Tyler Newman is gone. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss out on that content moving forward. If you like today's show, let me know in the comments below. I always appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the thoughts and everything. So thank you so much for listening. I'll see you tomorrow. Roll the boat, Sky Umago Gophers as always, and don't forget to hit subscribe.